So tonight's shiur is dedicated le'ilui nishmosam of two very special people. Tonight is the yortzeit of Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yitzchak Yehuda, the father of our dear friend Reb Shimon Fein. And it is also Yud Beis Adar. In a few days will be the yortzeit of Harav Yitzchak David ben Reb Avram Yankov, and that is, I believe, the father of my dear friend Dr. Freilich from America, who recently is living in Eretz Yisrael, and both our Kriyas Dika Mishtatfim, attendants of this shiur, and Shianuchu b'Sholom al Mishkavom, and they should be Malitzi Yosha for the wonderful families, and we should only hear B'Seiris Toivus, and the Torah that we learn today should be Le'ilui Nishmosam, because the greatest benefit we could do for the Neshamis is learning Torah in their memory. So it is only natural that today we speak about Purim, and next week, once again, we'll have one more shiur next Sunday night before Purim. So tonight we will be speaking about Megillah, which is the fundamental mitzvah of Purim. So we have many more mitzvahs. We have Shloach Monos, Matonos Evyonim, Sudas Purim, Chayvenish Levesumi. But Purim is first and foremost about Megillah. And it is noteworthy that the Rambam writes Hilchas Megillah v'Chanukah. Doesn't write Hilchas Purim v'Chanukah, which is interesting. And I didn't see anybody talking about this comment. He writes Hilchas Megillah v'Chanukah. He doesn't write Megillah v'Adlukas Haner or Purim v'Chanukah. Hilchas Megillah v'Chanukah. Purim is all about Megillah. That is the central mitzvah. So the Yeshua Malevi says, and Megillah Davdala Domedalev, Chayavodam Likroises Megillah Balayla Velishanoisa Biyom. And the Gemara says, Lishanoisa Biyom doesn't mean Lashon Shinun, which is learning, but rather reading it once again. Likroisa Megillah Balayla Velishanoisa Biyom. And that is why B'Kol Beis Yisrael we read the Megillah by night, and we read the Megillah again in the morning. And there's a machlokes between the Rambam and Balei HaTosfos. Do we say Shechiyanu again in the morning? So the Rambam, Perek Aleph Halacha Gimel Hilchos Megillah, clearly says, in the morning you don't say Shechiyanu. And L'cha'orah, that is simple, that is pashut. By every mitzvah, you only say Shechiyanu first time around, when you're the Mekayim the mitzvah the first time. So Ner Chanukah is Shmoina Lailos, 8 nights, but we only say Shechiyanu the first night. Mitzvahs will live 7 days, but we only say Shechiyanu the first day. So according to the Rambam, the same would apply to Mikra Megillah. We say the Shechiyanu by night and not when we read it again. But the two greatest Balei HaTosfos, and everybody that ever learned in a yeshiva or even a cheder knows who the two giants were. Balei HaTosfos, the Rian Rabbeinu Tam, both descendants of Rashi, and they both maintain, we say Shechiyanu again in the morning. Tosfos Daled Amud Aleph quotes the Ri. We say it again in the morning because Ikar Persume Nisa B'Yoim. And that seems to be a strange svara. Ikar Persume Nisa B'Yoim. So what? Do you say Shechiyanu because you have more Persume Nisa? So a person lit the first night Chanukah, and he said a Shechiyanu, and it's a quiet little street. Some people were out there, but there's a Simcha hall right next to where he lives. And the second night Chanukah, a Rebbe made a Sheva Bruchas there, and there were hundreds of people coming and going. Would he say Shechiyanu again? Because much more Persumenisa tonight than I had yesterday night. But you were Mekayim the mitzvah. So that he says, Ika Persumenisa B'Yoim, and that's why he says Shechiyanu B'Yoim. The Rosh, Perek Aleph Siman Vav, Hilchos Megillah, quotes Rabbeinu Tam. And Rabbeinu Tam says, Ikar Kriyosa B'Yoim. Not Persumenisa B'Yoim, Ikar Kriyosa. Ikar Mrs. Megillah B'Yoim. And I don't think Rian Rabbeinu Tam have two different interpretations. They both agree on the same halacha. They use a slightly different formula, different words. That he says, Ikar Persumenisa B'Yoim. Rabbeinu Tam says, Ikar Kriyosa B'Yoim. So we have a machlokes between the Rambam and Balei HaTosfos. And as one could definitely expect, the Beis Yosef and the Ramo traditionally Beis Yosef, Tofresh Tzadik Beis Sif Aleph Paskins, you do not say Shechionu B'dei. As always, the Beis Yosef follows the footsteps of the Rambam. And the Ramo, as always, follows the footsteps of Bari Atoises. And the Ramo says, Yesh Oimrim, we say Shechionu again in the morning. V'chein noyagim b'kol Medinos Elu, and all our Medinas, all our Kehilas, we say Shechionu again in the morning. And why is that? It's easy to understand the Rambam, as in all other precedents and other mitzvahs. How do we understand the Bali HaToises and the Minig Ashkenaz based on the Psak of the Ramo? So first I will quote 3 Mahalchim of Gedolei Achronim, and then Mashenera La'aniyas Daiti. So I am going in chronological order. The Turei Even, and the Turei Even is the great Shagas Ari, one of the greatest Achronim. And he has a Gevaldige Chiddush, and he says, Tkonis Anshei Knesses Agdoila, Mordechai veBeis Dinoi. The original Takona was only to read Megillah by day. Night was not part of the Takona. And that is why the Lashon of the Megillah is, V'hayomim ha'elen eskorim v'nasim, yomim v'lo lailos. And just like Sudas Purim needs to be by day and not by night, originally Megillah was only by day, not by night. It is only at a much later stage that the Chachamim were metakan, and that's Medivrei Soifrim, that's the Rabbanan and not Divrei Kabbalah. And the Chachamim were metakan at a later stage, hundreds of years later, that they should read Megillah by night as well. Afhen Hoya Ba'oisa Anes is a svara we will get to in a few moments. But the Chachamim later were metaken by night as well. And why? Because the Gemara says, Daf Yud Daled, in Masechet Megillah, that Kriyos is a Hilula. One should actually say Halal on Purim, but the Megillah is Halal. And who gave them the power to be metaken a new mitzvah? They had a Kal V'chomer. If we need to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say Halal for Yetzias Mitzrayim, which was Ma'avdas Lecherus, Memoves Lechayim Lo Kol Sheken, they had a Kal V'chomer. So the Turei Even says, that same Kal V'chomer brought them to a conclusion. We say Halal B'leila Seder as well. And if Ma'avdas Lecherus, we say Halal in the morning and by night as well, why don't we do the same regarding the Megillah? So according to the Turei Even, Megillah by day has far more importance and significance and weight than Megillah by night. Because by day it's Divrei Kabbalah. And Divrei Kabbalah, anything that has a source in Kisvei HaKodesh, in Divrei Nevi'im, in Divrei Aksuvim, is more important than Divrei Soifrim, than the Rabbanons. And that is why. You say Shechionu by night because it's the first time you've been Mekayim a mitzvah. And a mitzvah that comes once a year, you need to say Shechionu. But you say Shechionu again in the morning because it's a different tekona. And it's a greater mitzvah. By night, yesterday night was only Midrabanon, and this morning is Medivrei Soifrim. So that is the approach of the Turei Even. So the first ha'ara, this is such a fundamental chiddush, we would expect it to be in the Rishonim. And this is a comment I make many times. This is such a fundamental chiddush, a game changer. You know, B'yoyim is Divrei Kabbalah, B'layla is Divrei Soifrim. So that is the mahalach of the Turei Even to explain why we say two Shechionus, by night and by day. He has 2 great shutfim to this chiddush. The Noida B'Yehuda, who was 1 generation younger than the Shagas Aryeh, and the Yeshuas Yankov, 1 generation younger than the Noida B'Yehuda. So Noida B'Yehuda has an amazing tshuva chelek aleph. Madura kama Orach Chaim simen mem aleph. Maybe mem beis, I think it's mem aleph. And the Noida B'Yehuda was asked a question. In a certain city or town, I don't know where that was, it transpired. In the middle of the Megillah, child rushes into shul, Sudu alavona. The moon came out and showed its face, and they couldn't say Kiddush Levana till Leil Purim Diprozim. So somebody urgently sent an email or a WhatsApp to Prague to the Noida B'Yehuda to ask, what do we do? We're in the middle of the Megillah, and there's a Levana outside. What are we supposed to do? And he got an immediate response from the Noda B'Yehuda, stop the Megillah, go out, say Kiddush Levona, and then you continue and finish the Megillah. I wasn't there at the time, but I assume the dancing Toiva Ma'oris should wait till after they finish the Megillah, not in the middle of the Megillah. And probably also Shalom Aleichem Aleichem Shalom. But the psak was Birchas Alavona, Arroya Lavona Bechidusho, Tzorech Levorech, in the middle of the Megillah. And the Noda B'Yehuda explains his psak. We have two mitzvahs. Both are mitzvahs derabanan. One is a mitzvah oiveres, and the other not. Because nobody could guarantee that the Levana, that the moon will patiently wait till you finish the Megillah, and you might lose out the mitzvah. But the Megillah is on the bima, and it'll patiently wait. So you stop in the middle of a mitzvah shein oiveres to be mekayim mitzvah veres. But then the Noda B'Yehuda asks, you will challenge my psak and argue that Mikra Megillah is medivrei Kabbalah, and Kiddush Levona is only medivrei Soferim, midrabanan. So Mikra Megillah is a greater mitzvah than Kiddush Levona. Noda B'Yehuda says no, only in the morning it's medivrei Kabbalah, but by night it's midrabanan. So the Noda B'Yehuda is not coming to explain the Gemara, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, why you say Shechianu, but rather a psak halacha and din Kiddush Levona, but they both share this gewaldige Kiddush. And then the Yeshua's Yankov and Semen Tov Reish Tzadik, quoted twice by the Mishnah Berurah, Tov Reish Tzadik Beis and Tov Reish Tzadik. So these three Gedolim all have the same idea. Mikra Megillah Balayla, Mikra Megillah Yom are not the same. The original Tekon of Mordechai ve'Esther was only by day. Ayomim Mo'eran Eskorim Venasim. And by night was a later Tekona. And that is why we say Shechianu again in the morning. Approach number two, similar to number one, but not as far-fetched, and that is the Pri Megodim. Tov Reish Tzadik Beis, Sif Koten Beis, and that is the Sif that we quoted before, the Machlokes, the Mechaber, and the Ramo, which is actually the Machlokes Rambam and Bari Atosis. Do we say Shechianu in the morning? And the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Mogan Avram. Why do we say Shechianu in the morning? The Psak of the Ramo, the Minig of Bnei Ashkenaz, Iker Kriyoso. And as I quoted before, that's the Lashon of the Rosh, B'Shem Rabbeinu Tam. So Iker Kriyosa B'Yoim. And the Pri Megodim says, and that is a guess. It's actually a guess. And the Pri Megodim says, I think that Mordechai ve'Esther had two different tekonas. Tekona number one, which was the immediate tekona, Mikra Megillah B'Yoim. And only later, Udemetaken Mikra Megillah Balaylo as well. So he doesn't go so far to say that B'Yoim is Divrei Kabbalah and Balayla is only the Rabbanon. He says both tekonas were Mordechai ve'Esther, Anshe Knesses Agdoila. But one was the primary tekona, and Balayla was a secondary tekona, just to explain why Ikar Mitzvahs Kriyas Megillah B'Yom V'lo Balayla. That was the original tekona, and Balayla was an addition, a secondary tekona. That's the Pri Megodim. Source number two. Number three is the Tzafnas Pa'aneach, and that's the Rogatchover. And it's safe on the Rambam at the beginning of Hilchos Megillah, and the Tzafnas Pa'aneach says, what is the Machlokes Rambam and Bari Atosis, Ri and Rabbeinu Tam? Megillah Balaylo B'Yom, is it one mitzvah or two different mitzvahs? According to the Rambam, it's the same mitzvah. You don't say Shechianu twice on the same mitzvah. According to the Rambam, two mitzvahs. Not that one is more important than the other, but the two different mitzvahs. And that is why mitzvah number one deserves a Shechianu, and Megillah B'Yom deserves a Shechianu. And once again, this Mahalach seems rochaik be'enai, because what would the logic be that Megillah B'Yom v'Balayla would be defined as two separate mitzvahs? It's the same day, and it's the same mitzvah. Why would it be different than Kriyas Shema Shachris v'Arvis? This is Menatoida, that's the Rabbonon, but it should be the same. Kriyas Shema Shachris v'Arvis is not defined as two different mitzvahs. It is a mitzvah that we need to perform twice daily. Why would Shmoynes Yemei Chanukah be the same mitzvah, even though there's an entire day separating one from the other, and Megillah Balayla v'B'Yom would be two mitzvahs? Why would Shivas Yemei Chag and 7 days of Lulav would be the same mitzvah? We only say Shechionu the first day. And why would Megillah B'yam, B'layla V'b'yom be two different mitzvahs? Doesn't make sense. So I'm coming back to the Turei Oven before I will share with you Mashe Nerlani as deity. Coming back to the Turei Oven. So the Turei Oven has another Gewaltige Chiddush in the same Mahalach, in the same style. Rabbi Shua ben Levi has another halacha on that very same page of Daled Omud Aleph. Noshem chayovis b'mikra Megillah, afen hoyu ba'oisei haneis. Tosfos, both the Megillah Dav Daled and an Eirich in Dav Gimel. Tosfos brings the shit of halachas gedolos. Women are mechuyev b'mikra Megillah, but they cannot be moitzi men. And Tosfos doesn't explain why. And there are many drachim, which we don't have time to discuss tonight. But even though women are not exempt from this mitzvah, and they are mechuyev in Mikra Megillah, they cannot be moitzi men. Why not? So the Turei Oven says, Tekonis Neviim, Anshe Knesses HaGedoylo, Divrei Kabbalah is only men. Women are midrabanon. Because the Svor of Av Hen B'Yosei Nes is a Svor Chachomim. It is not the original Tekona. So the Turei Oven has the same approach and the same mahalach regarding two halachas. Both Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Laila v'Yom, only Yom is Medivre Kabbalah, Laila is Midrabanon, men and women. Men are Medivre Kabbalah, women are Derabanon. And that is why a Isha cannot be Moitzi a Ish. Because her Chiyev is only Derabanon. And just like Hamachuyev Derabanon can be Moitzi, Hamachuyev Diuraisa, Hamachuyev Derabanon cannot be Moitzi, Divrei Kabbalah. So it is the same approach explaining two Piskei Halacha of the Rishonim. Barei HaTosfos, Sinyan Rabbeinu Tam, that even though we say Rosh Hashanah by night, we say another one in the morning, and Halachas Gedolos, if Noshem are Chayev, why can't the issue be Moitzi Ya'ish? Because men are Chayev Medivrei Kabbalah, and women merely Medivrei Sofrim. And that is the other Turei Oven. Now, if we combine both Turei Ovens, we come up with two amazing chidushim, which we do not find anywhere. No Rishon and no Posek. If both Turei Ovens are right, then men say Shechionu in the morning, but women don't. Because to women, by night is the Rabbanan, and in the morning it's the Rabbanan. So by women, there's no difference between night and morning. And no Posek, quoting Rian Rabbeinu Tam, from the days of Rian Rabbeinu Tam up to the Turei Oven, and that was approximately about 700 years, or 650 years, all the Rishonim quote Rian Rabbeinu Tam and all the Poskim, and nobody has this huge ha'ara. Only men should say Shechionu in the morning. Because to men, by night was the Rabbon, in the morning is Divrei Kabbalah. But to women, it's always Divrei Kabbalah. So why would a woman say Shechionu in the morning? And on the other hand, if we combine the two Turei Ovens, then a woman could be moitzi a man by night. And the problem is only in the morning. Because the reason a woman cannot be moitzi a man is because she is chayiv derabon, he is chayiv midivrei kabbalah. But by night, they're all the same. Everybody is chayiv midirabon by night. So according to Halachas Gedolos, the problem is only a woman cannot be moitzi a man by morning, but she could moitzi by night. And because we do not find any of these two halachas in any of the Rishonim and Poskim, cannot be right. Because all the Poskim and all the Rishonim deal both with the halachas gedolos and both with the opinion of Gedol Ashkenaz Rabbeinu Tam. And we have two chidushim that are, you can't escape them if the Turei Oven is right. So, Ofer ve'efan anitachas kapes raglov, but we would ask the Turei Oven, decide which one of the two you want to hold and which one you want to drop, because they cannot both be right, because then anu boim. And the entire approach of the Turei Even, as I said, is a gewaldige Chiddush, to say that there are two different mitzvahs and two different levels. One is the Rabbanan and one is Medivrei Kabbalah. So, but the Turei Even, the other assumption that the Rabbanan cannot be moitze divrei Kabbalah is also a Chiddush. Turei Even is shitosoi. And the Turei Even of Hey Omed Beis, what we quoted, both Turei Evens we quoted are Daled Omed Aleph. Hey Omed Beis, he says that divrei Kabbalah are a level of divrei Torah and sveikom lechumra, and that goes against the Ritva and the Ran, the of Hey, that say sveikom the Rabbanon lekula, Megillah is the Rabbanon. But the Turei Even says divrei Kabbalah sveikom lechumra, and it's not a sveika the Rabbanon lekula. So the shitosoi, yes, it would be reasonable to say that the Rabbanon cannot be moitzi a divrei Kabbalah, because divrei Kabbalah is like divrei Torah. And that seems to be a machlokes Tosfos and the Meiri daf Yutes Omed Beis Mesechet Megillah. So daf Yutes and the Mishnah there's a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda v'Chachamim. Could a cotton learn the Megillah for Gedolim? Rabbi Yehuda says yes. Chachamim say no. And Tosfos asks why not? Mikra Megillah derabanan. Cotton shegiel chinuch is chayav derabanan. So both are derabanan. Why can't the cotton be moitzi agadol? And it is here that Tosfos is machadish, a very well-known chiddush. Trei derabanan cannot be moitzi chad derabanan. So to a cotton it's a trei derabanan. Megillah is derabanan, and a cotton is derabanan. And by gedolim it's only a chad derabanan. Trei derabanan can't be moitzi chad derabanan. According to the Turei Even, why doesn't Tosfos simply say, Cotton is chayiv derabanan, gedolim are chayiv medivrei Kabbalah, and the Rabbanan cannot be moitzi divrei Kabbalah? The Meiri answers that teretz and Tosfos kasha. So the Meiri is an early source to the assumption of the Turei Even that the Rabbanan cannot be moitzi divrei Kabbalah, and that is exactly what the Meiri says. Tosfos obviously holds it's not medivrei Kabbalah, and that is why Tosfos asks, they're both the Rabbanan. And Tosfos says, Tei the Rabbanan, Chad the Rabbanan. So on one hand, the Meiri would be a source to the fundamental assumption that the Rabbanan cannot be moitzi divrei Kabbalah. But on the other hand, the Meiri is a stira to the Turei Even differentiating between night and day. Because if we assume by night is only a Rabbanan, Hadra kushir duchter. So why can't the cotton be moitzi agodel at least by night when they're both the Rabbanon? And the Meiri doesn't accept the difference between Chad Rabbanon and Trei Rabbanon. So on one hand, the Meiri supports the Turei Even's lumdus that the Rabbanon cannot be moitzi adioraisa, but as a stira to the Turei Even's chiddush that by night it's only a Rabbanon. So im kain, why can't the cotton be moitzi agodel by night? So this is regarding the chiddush of the Turei Even. Coming back to Gufa Sugya, as I explained before, my feeling would be this. There are two ways to understand the essence of Mitzvah's Megillah. And what I say now in Lashon Kodesh, we say dakuyot. It's nuanced. But to me, it is so clear. It is so clear. And I try to explain it as the best I can, even though it's nuanced. Shtei drachim lagdir mitzvahs Megillah. What is the essence of mitzvahs Megillah? One havana would be persum enisa. How? By reading the Megillah. Reading the Megillah is methodology. The Haggadah is persume nisa. That is the mitzvah of Megillah. How? Chachamim didn't leave it up to everyone. You decide what you want to do. Kriyas Megillah. But the essence of the mitzvah is persume nisa. Or maybe no. The Haggadah, the definition, the essence is Kriyas Megillah. Why is that important? In order to make persume nisa. But the Haggadah is Kriyas HaMegillah. Lesaber esu oizen, just to make it easier to grasp and understand. Minchas Osher Dvorim, Parshas ve'eschanan. I don't know whether you have a Minchas Osher Torah here. I think you should. If you have me, why wouldn't you have the Minchas Osher? So if we have a Minchas Osher Dvorim, we do? Thank you, Rabbi, my dear Talmud. So Minchas Osher and Parshas ve'eschanan, there's a siman about Kriyas Shema. One of the most important mitzvahs we have, the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema and Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. Siman Yud Beis Minchas Osher. I wrote that I think the Bavli and the Yerushalmi have a machlokas how we define mitzvahs Kriyas Shema. There are two ways to understand Kriyas Shema. One would be mitzvahs Kriyas Shema is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. How? By reading Parshas Kriyas Shema. But the mitzvah is not reciting. The mitzvah is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. Saying Kriyas Shema is the methodology. That is what you need to do to be Makayim, the mitzvah of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. Or maybe no. The mitzvah is Kishma Kein Hi. Kriya. Like Mikra Megillah, like Kriyas HaTorah, Kriyas Shema. And the mitzvah is Lekro Pasha Mesuyem b'Torah. All day and night, you could learn whatever you want. B'shach b'rov kamecha. You need to read a certain pasha. Why this pasha and not any other? Hopefully, when you read the pasha, you will be makabel on Malchus Shamayim. So everybody agrees Kriyas Shema is about Kabbalas Ol Shamayim. But there are two different approaches and two different ways. Is the mitzvah lakabel ol malchus shamayim al yedei kriyas hapasha, or the mitzvah is kriyas hapasha kedei lekabel ol malchus shamayim? And I wrote that's a machloikes Bavli and Yerushalmi in four different sources, four different sugyas. But because our topic tonight is not Kriyas Shema, but rather Mikra Megillah, I'll just quote one. And it's just l'saber es uoizen, liyashav es advoram al alev. So in Shabbos Daf Yud Aleph, in Bavli, the Gemara says, Reb Shimon bar Yochai v'chaveirav, lo yehoyu mevatlan talmid Torah b'shvil tefillah. They ignored Zman Tefillah. When they were learning, they ignored Zman Tefillah. Learning comes before davening. But they could not ignore Kriyas Shema. Because Kriyas Shema is a mitzvah d'oraisa. And every mitzvah d'oraisa overrides Talmud Torah. The Yerushalmi twice in Bruchas Ana Shabbos says Reb Shimon bar Yochai v'chaveirav ignored Kriyas Shema like they ignored Zman Tefillah. And they were not mafsik mitalmudam even for Kriyas Shema. And then the Yerushalmi asks, really? Could that be? They were not mevatel Talmud Torah for matzah, for lulav, for sukkah? And then the Yerushalmi has a very harsh expression. Haloi meit shelo al menat la'asois, noach lo ilu nefchu shel yosei al ponav lo yotze la'avir oilam. You would be better off dead than alive if you learn Torah and you're not mekayim mitzvahs. If you don't practice what you preach, you would be better off dying in the fetal stage and never seeing the day of light, the Yerushalmi says. So how come they ignored Kriyas Shema when they learned Torah? The Yerushalmi answers, Zeh shinun v'zeh shinun ve'ein mevatlin shinun mipnei shinun. And that's an amazing way of describing Kriyas Shema. Shinun. It's learning. It's reading. So I'm reading another parsha. So Kriyas Shema and Talmud Torah are of the same nature. All the day and all night we learn whatever we wish to learn. Twice a day we need to read a certain parsha. But essentially it's Shinun. It's not like matzah, it's not like lulav, it's not like sukkah. It's reading Torah. Ein mevatlin shinun mipnei shinun. What does the Bavli say? The Bavli says no. It's not Shinun. It's not about reading, it's not about learning. It's Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. So if you would ask me, Shimon HaTzadik hoyu oimo mishiurei anshe knesses agdoyle. Everybody remembers the mission at the beginning of Masechet Avos. An shloisha dvorim olam oimed. Ala Torah, ala avodah mitzrodim. Where does Kriyas Shema fit in? number one or number two? Is it Torah or Avodah? It is clear to me, according to Yerushalmi, it's Torah. Zeh shinun v'zeh shinun. Ve'im mevatlin shinun mipnei shinun. According to the Bavli, it's Avodah. It has nothing to do with Torah. It's Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim. It's Avodah, like Tefillah is Avodah. Kriya Shema is the same. So I'm just giving you this piece of Minchas Osha and Kriya Shema because it's similar. The Machlokes Bavli Yerushalmi is, what is Kriya Shema? Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim al yedei Kriyas HaParsha, or Kriyas HaParsha kedei lekabel Ol Malchus Shemayim? And the same question I say regarding Mikra Megillah. Is it Persumei Nisa al yedei Kriyas HaMegillah, or is it Kriya? Like Kriyas HaTorah, like Kriyas Shema, Kriyas HaMegillah. Hopefully, Kriyas HaMegillah will bring Persumei Nisa. That's the Machlokes Rambam and Rabbeinu Tam. The Rambam says the mitzvah is Kriya. That's the mitzvah. So why does it make a difference how many people came? The mitzvah is Kriya. So you can only make the Shechiyona once. And it's the same mitzvah, by night and by day. Rabbeinu Tam and Dari say no. The mitzvah is Persumei Nisa. So originally, the Ikka mitzvah is Persumei Nisa. And in days of yore, there was always far greater Persumei Nisa in the morning than by night. Because we have so many sources in Chazal, most people were afraid to leave their homes by night. People stayed at home by night. And that is why the Rishonim say, Ikar Persumei Nisa b'yoyim. And if Ikar Persumei Nisa b'yoyim, Ikar ha-mitzvah b'yoyim, because the mitzvah is Persumei Nisa. So what I want to escape is, we don't need to go as far as to say, Mikra Megillah b'yoyim is medivrei Kabbalah and Balayla it's medivrei Soifrim. We don't even need to say it's two different tekonas. The first tekona was b'yoyim and the second tekona was Balayla. But when the Toises quotes the Ri, Ikar Persumei Nisa b'yoyim, and the Rosh quotes Rabbeinu Tam, Ikar Mitzvahs Megillah b'yoyim, they mean the same. Because Mitzvahs Megillah is Persumei Nisa. And Persumei Nisa is the mitzvah. It is not only the rationale, it is not only the result, it is not only the motive why they were metakan the mitzvah of Kriyas Megillah. It is the Hagdorah, the definition. Mitzvahs Megillah is Mitzvahs Persumei Nisa alidei Kriyas Megillah. And therefore, because Ikar Persumei Nisa b'yoyim, that means Ikar Mitzvahs Kriyas Megillah b'yoyim. So you need to say Shechiyona b'night because it's the first time you're Mekayim the mitzvah. But the Ikar mitzvah is b'yoyim, and that is why you say Shechiyonu b'yoyim. So this parish is Misyashev Beloshen HaToisves. The other Pirushim are Ikar Chosam and HaSeifer. And this is Pashtas Kavonas HaToisves, Kachli b'yoyimali. So as I said, that's a Machlokes B'S Yosef and Ramo. Svardim have one meaning and Ashkenazim have another meaning. 2 years ago, in the height of this terrible war that we have known 2 years ago, and Baruch Hashem it's over, and I say Baruch Hashem it's over, and so many people hope it's going to come back, and I do not hope it's going to come back. I hope it'll never come back. V'natati sholem ba'oretz u'shchaftem ve'ein machrid. But I had a fascinating shaila, and many soldiers called me from the field. And some of them said we could either choose the Megillah by night or in the morning, because this is active service. We're out in ambushes, we're attacking, so we could either choose to hear the Megillah by night and then very early in the morning we're out there in the field again, or we could be at night and we're hearing the Megillah in the morning. Which of the two should we choose? So according to everything we said up to this point, we need to ask them, are you Sephardi or Ashkenazi? If you're Sephardi, both are the same. Then Zriza Magdim and Mitzvahs. Take the night one. If you're Ashkenazi, then morning is far more important than night. Maybe it's Divrei Kabbalah, that's Divrei Sefer, that's the Ikar Mitzvah. And because the army is fundamentally about 50% Ashkenazi and 50% Sephardi, will be okay, I think. So L'chaira, my psak should have been are you Sephardi or Ashkenazi? And then we'll have one battalion which will be all Sephardi, and the other one which will be all Ashkenazi. Not very reasonable, but that was not my psak. So, if we assume that Mrs. Megillah B'Yom is more important than it is by night, and obviously, according to the Niyar Rabbeinu Tam, that's clear. That's what they say. We just had 3 explanations. Why? How do we define that? But the morning is more important than night. So that would bring us a question, what is preferable? Zrizn Magdim ala mitzvahs or mitzvah min hamuvchar? And that is a very famous Trumas edition quoted in the Ramosim and Tav Chavav, and we come back to Kiddush Levana. So the Ramo writes, and the source is Trumas edition, Megidolei Ashkenaz, that it is preferable to say Kiddush Levana Meitzui Shabbos and not a middle of the week. And therefore, if it's summertime, and there's no reason to question, will we have a Levana Meitzui Shabbos, especially in Eretz Yisrael, in summer it's never cloudy, then wait for Meitzui Shabbos. If it's wintertime, and if you wait, you might lose out entirely because maybe it's going to be rainy and cloudy, then do it in the middle of the week. First opportunity you have. So the Tumas Edition clearly says, mitzvah min hamuvchar is more important than zrizn magdim ala mitzvahs. And why is Motzei Shabbos by Kiddush Levana mitzvah min hamuvchar? Because people are dressed up nicely on Big Dish Shabbos and they're happy. So it is not really that different, Kiddush Levana Motzei Shabbos for the middle of the week. Those are not fundamentals. So you have Begodim Noim, you're dressed up being Big Day Shabbos. Doesn't really make that much difference. The importance of Mikra Megillah by day more than by night is far greater than the Chumrah of Kiddush Levana Motzei Shabbos. And if we say Kiddush Levana Motzei Shabbos is more important than Zrizn, we definitely should say Mikra Megillah B'Yom should come before Mikra Megillah B'Layla. So why wasn't that my psak? Because that very same Ramo says, if it's winter, do it as soon as possible. And why is that? Minchasosha Pashas V'Yero. Once again, I don't remember which siman, and I constantly apologize. I remember many Sforim better than Minchasosha for a simple reason, because to me, Minchasosha is not Gersa Diyankuta. What could I do? When I was young, Sefer wasn't around. So many Svarim, when I learned when I was young, I remember better. But in Parshas V'Yero, there's a very important siman. And I explained the difference between 2 concepts, Zrizn Magdim ala mitzvahs and Shehiu mitzvahs lo mashinan. The fundamental halacha of Zrizn Magdim is Mila b'Yom hashmini. Kol hayom kosher lamila. But do it as soon as you can. Zrizn Magdim ala mitzvahs. The other concept, Shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan, is primarily in Yevomis Lametes. Yibum v'chalitza. These mitzvahs rest upon the oldest brother that is alive. One brother passed away, and he had no children, and there's a mitzvah of chalitza. It is upon the oldest brother. If the oldest brother is Medina Sayam, he's abroad, we don't wait. We don't wait. We turn to the next in line. And why is that? Shehiu mitzvahs lo mashinan. Don't push off a mitzvah. Don't postpone a mitzvah. And I wrote, Zrizn Magdim ala mitzvahs is presented in a positive connotation, what you should do. Shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan is in a negative connotation, what you should not do. Don't push off a mitzvah. Don't postpone. And I explained. Zrizn Magdim ala mitzvahs is even when there's no doubt. We could do it either now or in the afternoon. Kol hayom shmini kosher lamila. The moil is here. The baby is here. We'll never have a problem finding a sandik. That's never a problem. So there's no reason to doubt. We could do it later, but it's better to do it earlier. Zrizn Magdim is an expression of chibuv mitzvah. We love our mitzvahs. When you ask a child, when do you want to make your room? When do you want to make up your room? Make the bed, pick up all the toys from the floor. When do you want to do it? He'll always say later. Ask him, when do you want your ice cream? He will never say later. He wants it now. So these Madim mitzvahs is a reflection of chibuv mitzvah. Do it now. When something is a core, a burden, we always want to push it off for later. Something you love and you enjoy, you want to do it as early as possible. That's the Madim mitzvahs. Shiur mitzvah lo mashinan is you might lose out. The older brother needs to come from Chutz La'aretz. And in those days, it wasn't like hopping on a plane and just letting you know when it arrives. It was always a sakana. Either holchem midboriyos or ovrayamim, and you need to say a goimel, and it took months to get home. And nobody guarantees that the younger brother will stay around till the older brother comes, and we don't know when he's going to come. And you might lose out entirely, and this woman will stay in aguna, and she can't get married. And that is shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan. And that explains the tumas sedeshin. If it's summer, wait. Better to wait. Mitzvah min hamufra comes before its reason. But if it's winter, you might lose out. Do it now. So I said to all those young soldiers, it's war. Nobody could promise you what's going to be tomorrow morning. There might be an attack. Do it now. This is like shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan. It's not a question of zriz magdim ala mitzvahs against mitzvah min hamufchar. It is a question of shiur mitzvahs lo mashinan. It is war. Nobody could promise you what's going to happen tomorrow morning. There might be a surprise attack. Who knows? Who knows? And therefore, do it by night. Whoever can, do it by night. Hopefully, you could do it again tomorrow, and you're going to have even a greater mitzvah, but do it by night. And now comes along the sfas emes. Mitzvah lekroisas Megillah balaylo veleshanoisa biyom. And the sfas emes is always original. And whenever I quote the sfas emes, I just make a point about the derech halimed of the sfas emes. You all know who the sfas emes was. It was the Ger Rebbe. And unlike the Avnei Nezer and the Divrei Chaim and the Chidushei Harim and the Tzemach Tzedek, who were Rabbeim, but during their lifetimes, they were known to be the greatest Gedolim. And Poskim, the sfas emes was a classical Rebbe, a Polish Rebbe. During his lifetime, nobody knew he's a great Lamb. Nobody knew. He was a Rebbe like other Polish Rebbeim. It is only after his ptira that the world was shocked when they printed the sfas emes. And he wrote on the entirety of Shas, but most of it was lost during the Holocaust. What we have is Moyed and Kodshim. What we don't have is all the other Zdorim in Shas. And I know that the Lev Simcha, Zainikel, made a great effort and spent a lot of money trying to locate those ksavim, but to no avail. And the derech halimit of the sfas emes was unique. He didn't learn Poskim, he didn't learn Rishonim. Maybe he learned on his own, but not when he wrote a sefer. He learned Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, and wrote his Chidushim. And that is actually the derech halimud of an entire cheder, the Marsha. The Marsha never quotes Rishonim. Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos. And that's where and we see the greatness of the Semes and his yashas, because he constantly is mechaven to the kashas and the terutzim of the Rashba, of the Ritva, of the Ran, of the great Rishonim. So anyway, but the sfas emes in this sugya has an amazing chiddush. I don't think anybody thought about it before, and not even after. So the sfas emes says, the Ikar mitzvah is mikra Megillah biyoim, and balaylo is just as a preparation for biyoim. And if you know you're not going to have a Megillah in the morning, you're potter from Megillah by night. Amazing. And the only reason to read Megillah by night is because by day it needs to be second Megillah. But if you don't have a Megillah in the morning, you don't even have a mitzvah to read the Megillah by night. And that is the Shanoisa B'yoim, and that is Ikar Kriyosa B'yoim. And that's an amazing chiddush. So according to this Vasemis, my psak would be totally wrong when I say, here by night. First, Shiur mitzvahs lo mashinen. But if I won't hear in the morning, there's no point in hearing by night. Would it be a bracha levatala by night? But this Vasemis is such a gavaldige chiddush and nobody says it. And leis the chashla, we don't even need to take this into account. However, there's an amazing Yerushalmi. Would anybody know whether there's a Yerushalmi in this room? I would ask Rabbi Rottenberg. Yerushalmi Megillah. Yerushalmi Megillah. An amazing Yerushalmi. And that is a Megillah, Perik Weiss Halacha Aleph, or maybe Perik Weiss Halacha Gimel. What I remember in Tfus Vilna, Chof Amid Beis. But today everything is Ois V'Hoda. So Vilna is no longer relevant. All the Daf Yomi Yerushalmi went over to Ois V'Hoda. But I'm an old man and I wrote 35 Sforim and I can't go over 35 Sforim now and change all the quotes I quoted from the Yerushalmi. So it's Tfus Vilna. So the Yerushalmi says, Reb Chanina Rogel, Oimer, Kodesh HaMegillah B'Yom, V'Shoina B'Layla. I think it's Reb Chanina. Reb Chanina Rogel. And what the Bavli quotes from Reb Shua ben Levi in the Yerushalmi is another Amoira. Do you find one? Gewaldig. Schottenstein is good. It'll take me a moment to find. Schottenstein is Ois V'Hodar, actually. So it has different dapim. But at the top of every page, they do quote Tfus Vilna as well. So with Avchaf Amud Beis. I don't know Tzuras Adaf here, so it'll take me a moment to find. Okay. Reb Elazar b'shem Reb Chanina Rogil, tzorach l'kleisa b'layla v'l'shonoisa b'yom. Pnei Moshe says Reb Chanina Rogil was a name. Somewhat an uncommon name, but a name, Reb Chanina Rogil. Korb Me'eda says maybe it's a name, but nera liyoisa, that the Yerushalmi says, a Rogil, a Boki, needs to read the Megillah twice, b'layla b'yom. But if he's not Rogel and he's not a Boki, day is enough. He doesn't need to read by night. If this is Pshat in Yerushalmi, this is a Gavaldige Chiddush. That the mitzvah of Laila and Yom is only b'misha Rogel, only a Boki. So the Talmidei Chachumim, that it's not a great effort for them, they need to read it twice. B'Laila v'Yom. Misha Einoi Rogel v'Boki, they would be enough. Only read it by day. So this would once again prove Ikar mitzvahs Megillah b'yom velo b'layla. And that is the Ikar mitzvah. And that would substantiate the psak of Gedolei Ashkenaz, and Rabbeinu Tam. So most of the Achronim don't like this pshat. But the reason they don't like this pshat is, that's a new halacha. So what? It's a Yerushalmi. Ain't halacha Yerushalmi. I don't see any problem with this. And I think it's unlikely that the Chanina Rogil would be a name. So I dafka like the pshat of the Korb Me'eda. Shouldn't bother us, because ain't a lochik Yerushalmi, and in Bavli, none of the Rishonim explained this mahalach in Bavli. And then there's the Ran, and the Ran says, B'nei akforim shemagdimen liyoim haknisa. They don't need to read the Megillah by night. For them, it's enough by day. So we see additional sources to be mechazik the opinion of Bali HaTosfos. Ikor mitzvahs Megillah b'yoyim. Now, I think the Turi Even is too much of a chiddush, and maybe even the Pri Megadim. So I would prefer my approach, Ikor mitzvahs Megillah b'yoyim, because Ikor mitzvahs Megillah is Pesum Enisa, and Ikor Pesum Enisa b'yoyim. So once again, going back to those young soldiers, and the same question could be presented by a doctor or by a nurse, and he has emergency surgery in the morning, and But if he has emergency surgery in the morning, he can't do it by night. So it wouldn't be that practical in medicine. But sometimes you could choose. You could choose which shift do you want, the morning shift or the night shift. And I know that I'll be so busy in the hospital that when it's my responsibility, I won't be able to listen to the Megillah. So the same question could come up in two different disciplines, either in the medical field or in the military field, when a person needs to choose either Megillah by night or by day. So on one hand, according to Bnei Ashkenaz, Megillah by day is more important than by night. And even maybe according to the Rambam, Bnei Svarad, because the Ran was a Sephardi, and he says it's Chiddush by Bnei Kvorim. We don't know whether the Yishalmi was a Sephardi or an Ashkenazi. So we find additional sources that Megillah by day is more important than by night. And maybe the Rambam wouldn't disagree with that, but the Rambam says that is not a reason to say Shechiyonu twice. And because it's the same mitzvah, you say Shechiyonu by night and you don't say it by day. And nevertheless, my psak was, if you need to choose, choose night, because you cannot know what tomorrow will bring. So let us hope these shilas would not be relevant for a long, long, long time, and they might still be relevant in different fields, as I explained. So today we spoke about Pirsumei Nisa, and that is what the Megillah is all about. So many times I quoted the Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo, the Ramban explaining why is it so important to forever remember the Nisim of Yetzias Mitzrayim. מן הניסים הגדולים והמפורסמים עוד המועד בניסים הנסתורים שהם יסוד כל התורה כולו, שאין לנו חלק בתורס מוישה עד שנדע שכל דברינו ומקרינו הם ניסים, אין בהם טבע ומנהגוי של עולם. So the Ramban says, why is it important to remember those miraculous, supernatural, amazing events of Aseres HaMakas and Yetzias Mitzrayim? Because miracles of that nature will not happen many times. That was Yetzias Mitzrayim. And when we will forever remember those miracles, we will appreciate and believe in the miracles of concealment, of the Nisim and Astorim. Life is the greatest miracle of all. Anisecho v'nifloisecho shebachol yoyim imonu, erev uvoiker v'tzohorayim. The Nisim and Astorim, that is what makes us Jews. That is what makes us Anshe Emuno. Knowing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control. He controls nature and he is above and beyond nature. Ve'ein oid milvadoi. So I mentioned this many, many times. There was one Tana in Tkufis HaMishnah who was the Rebbe, the Admor, in the days of the Mishnah. I don't want to say he was the Baba, because a Baba has a somewhat negative connotation to many. But I'm talking about Reb Chanina ben Dosa. We don't have even one halacha that Reb Chanina ben Dosa taught us. Nowhere in the Mishnah, in Tosefta, in Gemara, is there one mamar halacha from Reb Chanina ben Dosa. All we know about him is Nisim v'Neflois, and there was always a long line waiting outside his door for kvitlach. You know what kvitlach is? Even a Litvak today knows what a kvitlach is. Even to me, some people bring kvitlach, and I don't know why. And there was always a long line, because you got an immediate response. And he says in Brochas Lamed Im tfilos hashgura b'fi yodei anishim miskabeles. And you ask for a brocha, and you got it on the spot. So all we know about Reb Chanina ben Dosa is various different stories about Moifsim, Nisim v'Neflois. One of the stories is the end of Masechet Tanis. And I'll explain why I quote this story. Shabbos afternoon, the bells are ringing outside, and the Karaz is singing, and his daughter breaks out crying. And the father asks the daughter, why are you crying, Yaldati? And she says, Abba, we don't have Shabbos candles. I try to light the candles. It's not happening. And I just realized we don't have Hashem, and it's chometz, it's vinegar. we're not going to have any candles. And Reb Chanina Medoisa smiles and he says, my lovely little girl, we'll have Shabbos candles, don't worry. Misha Omer Hashem and v'yadlek, Yom HaLachayim is v'yadlek. I wasn't there, but I could imagine the little girl looks at her father and he says, Abba, you're such a big tzaddik. But I go to Bisyanka, we learned chemia, we learned chemistry. Abba, there's no such a thing, vinegar doesn't burn. Abba, maybe you don't know. But vinegar is not inflammable, it doesn't burn. And Reb Chanina smiles with just such chiyuch shel chemla, and he says, Biti yikara, I'm not as ignorant as you think. I know that vinegar doesn't burn. But why is that? Because that's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to be. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want you to cry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to be happy. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to have Shabbos candles. So I believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu will say now, at least in the home of Chanina ben Dosa, vinegar would burn. Why not? To HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's all the same. So we are no longer in a spoil that Reb Chanina ben Dosa makes a miracle. Miracles were with him every day. What you need to learn is the sprach, the simplicity. He tells his daughter, "My ich paslach." Don't cry. My ich paslach. Does it really make a difference whether it's oil or vinegar? Makes no difference, because to HaKadosh Baruch Hu it's all the same. To HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nes and Teva are the same, and there is nothing between Nes and Teva, because Teva alone is the greatest Nes, and the one that created Teva, and the one that activates Teva and gives life to Teva is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he tells his daughter, why are you crying? Stop crying. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want you to cry. If oil could burn, so could vinegar. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. And everything is Ratzoin Hashem. Ratzoinei HaPoshet Yisborach Shemoy. And that is why we need to remember the Nisim of Yetzias Mitzrayim, to appreciate the everyday Nisim. And that's what Purim is all about. Purim is the only Nes which was 100% natural phenomena. Nothing beyond the realm of nature. Yetzias Mitzrayim was all supernatural from beginning to end. Nothing was natural. Chanukah, Rabim biyad me'atim, Geborim biyad chaloshim, but we still had the Nes of Pach HaShemen, which was miraculous. Purim, everything was natural. But you needed to be blind, and you needed to be a koifa be'ikah not to see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control. So the Ramah brings a minhag. Tzorech lifrois es ha-Megillah ke'igeres kedei laharois haneis. You don't read the Megillah like a Sefer Torah when it's Megillah. You spread it out. Kedei laharois haneis. How exactly do we show the neis by spreading out the Megillah? Maybe what the Ramah means, kedei laharois ha-Megillah. Everybody should see the Megillah. It's spread out. It's big. But that's not what the Ramah writes. And I say, when you read the Megillah, one yeriah at a time, there's nothing outstanding in the Megillah. It's a story. But if you read the Megillah, beskira achas, and you see this amazing, unbelievable chain of events, and everything that seemed to spell tragedy for the Jews, that was part of the salvation. That was part of the Yeshua. So I say, if it would be possible, Chazal would be metaken that we need to read the Megillah b'neshim achas, but we barely make it to Vayzoso b'neshim achas. So we can't. If it would be possible, that would be the way to read the Megillah. We spread out the Megillah. Look at this story. Look at the sequence. Look how every event turned out to be memaka atzma HaKadosh Baruch Hu metaken ritiyah, and magdim refuah lamaka, and that is soif hanisim. And Purim teaches us the nisim hanistorim, and that is what the Megillah is all about. The nisim hanistorim, and that is why Chazal say v'zichram leYosef mezaram kol hamoyedim hasidim leyibotel. And why is that? Because the other Yom Tovim that prove that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could make nisim, won't be relevant, Liosed Lavoi. Everything will be miraculous. People will live forever. Olam HaNeshamas, there will be no need to tell us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes miracles. Our existence will be miraculous. But it still would be important looking back at Golus and understanding everything we've been through. Derech HaTeva was one huge nace. And all the tzoros we endured were Rachamei Shamayim. And that will be important even la'ased lavoi. And that is why Megillah will stay with us. Purim will stay with us. Because Purim we saw that everything that seemed to be tragic, at the end of the day, it all was part of Yeshua's Hashem. Haman was so happy when his advisors told him that Chodesh Adar is a terrible month. Moshe Rabbeinu died in Chodesh Adar. Little did they know that that's our greatest month. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was born in Adar, v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu mamarash noseim shel tzadikim miyoyim liyoyim. We could imagine how the Jewish community felt when out of the thousands of women and girls, and each and every one of them tried to be so appealing to Achashverosh, and there was one tzedekis that grew up in the house of the Gadol Ador b'kedusha v'tahara, and she asked for nothing. She wanted to be as unappealing to Achashverosh as barely possible, and that crazy king out of all the thousands chose Esther. How tragic. How broken the Jewish community was. And then when they went out every morning in the street and they saw that skyscraper, Eitz Gavoya Chamisha Mamo, and everybody knew what that means. And in those days it was a skyscraper, and you saw it from every place in town, and the Jews couldn't lift their eyes. They looked down at the floor. Venahafoichu. And every stage that seemed to spell tragedy for Klal Yisrael was transformed, and they all became part of Yeshua's Hashem. And that is the message of Purim. The message that everything is Nisam and everything is Rachamei Shamayim. And that is what Purim is all about. And that is why Zichrom lo Yosef Lazarim. So there are more paskins. If you forgot to say Al Nisam Ebech Zamozan, you say Hurachamon. Hurachamon Hu Yasalon Nisam V'Ros Keshem Shosisel Avaseinu. So today we finish our Shiur by saying Hurachamon Hu Yasalonu Nisam V'Ros Keshem Shosisel Avaseinu B'Yom Ubezman Hazeh. We should once again see Nisam V'Nefrois and Rachamei Shamayim Be Yeshua's Hashem Ke'erafayin Be'Bias Goyel Tzedek B'Mheiro V'Yomeinu Amen.